I do believe with my whole heart, you could say I could be sincerely wrong, that the Japanese Christians that died upon those crosses or in those tortured, chambered places were giving up their lives not in vain, but so people hundreds of years later could look back and say they believed, they walked to the end. They gave a story that God is not outside of the world, but is in their life. And they didn't fear suffering, but endured what Jesus endured, walking through death to find eternity. The Jesuits had a profound impact upon Japan. The Basque Country, where I live, is the home place or the birthplace of the Jesuit institution. I grew up as a person in a secular environment in Australia. I'm very thankful for that. I read the Chronicles of Narnia, which predated my conversion to Christianity, and I've been part of what you would call a Protestant worldview since that conversion. I've more recently studied about Catholicism and particularly interested in the Jesuits in Japan and the Catholic influence there. I by no means want to divide myself from Catholic or Protestant or other groups that are focusing on the supremacy of Jesus in their life, and I hope that these videos will be educational for myself but also for anyone else wanting to know more about Jesus. I would like to speak about the idea of God being personal and stepping into history. I made a few videos about the nature of the universe, written by an American Japanese of Japanese descent ethnically, a video which is somewhere here below in the comments. And I do like to think about first the bigger picture of the meaning of the universe, the meaning of life. I also like to ponder the meaning of you and I having this time together, and particularly and profoundly impacted by the nature of Jesus' interaction with a lady of Samaritan background. So from the creation of the world, you have this moment, you focus in now on a lady getting water from a well from her ancestors, and yet her own people have been excluded from those ancestors. She is, of course, the lady from the Samaritan background that Jesus interacts with and asks for a drink. She's a little bit skeptical of Jesus, and Jesus explains to her her life. Some would say in a very dramatic way that shines a light on the mistakes and the moral shortcomings of her life. Others would say, in my opinion, it focuses on the grace and love of God for someone who has not a theologically accurate view of life. She sees herself as separated. She feels that condemnation from another people, because I think it shows that God reveals himself to people that maybe are, in many religious terms, unworthy. And I think that condemnation of unworthiness, if you're from a scientific or religious or, doesn't have to be one or the other, background, could you share some of your understanding of the inconsistencies of God being able to walk and dwell with people, being both creator and savior of humanity, and that saving grace being something of people stepping into beauty, into restoration, into peace, into harmony with the original purpose of life. I want to talk about the specifics, and I think starting from the topic of the universe and meaning, then I think we find ourselves in this discussion where one will say, what a waste of life, or even see this intrusion into culture in Japan as a great offense, aiming to understand why someone would give up their life to profess that God dwells with us and that God is not something of apart from the universe, but actually dwells in life itself and brings a connection and hope that is relational and that is personal, and that is a salvation experience in terms of God restoring hope that life will not just be temporal, life will not be meaningless, but it will be deeply personal as we walk with God into what he's doing. That is actually part of what the message that Jesus brings about, that there is a new kingdom being brought into creation and that God makes all things new. Does this prove the existence or nature of God? No, but it does prove that you and I still are talking about this many years later, maybe to the great annoyance of some, yet to the great joy, that you and I can know that God would never leave us or forsake us, that the world may consider it loss, but we consider finding Christ as of eternal value. And that when we find Christ, we're not finding a religion or a philosophy, but we're finding the creator of all the universe, the one that is tender and loving. My name is Jonathan. Thanks so much for watching this video.